And welcome everybody to a special edition of Tidal Flooding Talk. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. We are doing this with the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in conjunction with our broadcast partner at Tri-X 57. I am here with Dan Skeldon in Palmas Shiles. We are very close to the 13th anniversary of Superstorm Sandy. We could fill a whole episode and many more about Sandy, but 13 years ago, the one thing, not so much about Sandy itself, but now being 13 years removed, is that there were a number of people who weren't even in New Jersey for Sandy at this point. And if you're if you're under 20 years old now, you just don't really remember much of it. I mean, I'm 34 and I was a senior in college for this. Granted, I remember a lot of it, but I'm just saying, I was even, pretty young. It's just I guess it's one of those time flies things, right, Dan? I mean, you were right there in the thick of it.
Yeah, we were on the air for I don't know how many straight hours. But lived in Ocean City, worked in Linwood and Summers Point for Sandy. I mean, that's still my benchmark storm. I mean, if you lived through it, if you were old enough, you'll never forget it. You'll wait for the day that they officially call it a hurricane at landfall. It may be 40 years from now, but I will be alive hopefully for that day. And actually, just to allude to our guest today, I remember where I was 7 or 8 or 9 days before Sandy, and that was watching the Long Ranger video, which was one of my daily routines in the Channel 40 Weather Center. It was part of my forecast. I would watch a Long Ranger video, and I remember our guest tonight, who I'm really excited to talk to.
Well, by that time,
by that time,
Dan, it was either the Raging Weather Bull.
Okay.
Or, yeah, because I was over with.
That's right. That's right.
Then.
Fair enough.
That I'll let you guys. And one thing with me is I used to wrestle Penn State. If I could wrestle the way I talk, I'd be a national champion. That whole downgrading it at 5 o'clock. My father, a meteorologist, lived in Summers Point, right? And the night before Sandy, I was really concerned it was going in at the mouth of the Delaware. Instead of a 4 to 6 foot surge into Summers Point, they'd have 8 to 10 feet. Now that wouldn't flood my mom and dad's house, but it would cut them off. And I was concerned that if they got cut off, God forbid, they're older people, something happened, no one could get to them. It's so funny thinking about my dad. I've been through this storm, and I was up at the Fox studio, and I'm telling Dad, can't you just go inland for a little bit? I was in 38, I was in 54, I'm not going anywhere. We're staying in this house. And that he said to me, it didn't get bad until the eye came by. And he was down we had the barometer in there went to 27.96. And when that south wind came in, after the center went inland, he said, for about 3 or 4 hours, he said, that's when it was kind of scary. Because they would get wind gusts 80 miles an hour out of the south there. They're not too far from the bay in there. But, I computed for the meteorologists out there, the thickness, the 1,500 millibar thickness, when Sandy reached the coast with a 946 pressure and the 500 millibar height was 606, right? Now, I don't know how you say that that's not warm core. Since it filled 30 millibars in 12 hours after making landfall, like hurricanes do. And I just think they decided it wasn't going to be a hurricane, and no matter what happened, I mean, if you're going to play that game, every hurricane that gets up into the Northeast is going to be declared, post-tropical or whatever. A 38 hurricane, had no rain on the eastern side of it, for goodness sakes, right? And so you had all the wind on one side, and the sun was out in when they had the wind gusts 120 miles an hour in Providence with Carroll, the sun was out. There's just a Cirrus deck over them, right?
Yeah.
And I said to my dad, I go, are you sure? And then I looked at that famous picture. If you've ever seen that famous picture of the guy holding onto the tree, it's bending over, Hurricane Carroll. You could see cumulus clouds and just a white hazy background because it was just a Cirrus deck at the time. So, obviously you're trying to introduce this, and I'm already talking here. The inconsistency is what drives me nuts. You saw what happened at Virginia Beach a week and a half ago. There was an eye on the radar going into Virginia Beach, 8 inches of rain, 63-mile-an-hour wind gust, tides 2 to 3 feet above normal. Willoughby spits underwater. I worked quite a bit down there when I was at AccuWeather. I used to do the radios down there, and they just refuse to acknowledge it. Or even last year, PTC 8, right? Last year went into South Carolina. How does a storm cause 20 inches of rain and 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts is mid-September coming into South Carolina without having enough tropical nature? So I think that they got to get it so it's objective. You know, when I was working at AccuWeather, I used to say, you know, sometimes I think they did that so that you guys are on the air, right? You have to pay attention. In other words, Joe and Dan and Palma, if you want to say, hey, this is a hurricane, or you're looking at the odds, and let's say it's a tropical storm, right? Or they're saying it's a tropical storm. You're looking at the recon. Wait, 977. It's got 81 knot winds. That's a hurricane, but you have to wait till it's official. And you know, I don't know what the answer is. I actually love the Hurricane Center, but I think they get caught up in this minutia. Sometimes it's a classroom, sometimes it's not. You know, you go name a ham sandwich out in the middle of the North Atlantic that's a strato Q swirl, and then something comes in and actually causes problems, and it never gets a name.
Dan,
Well-
remind me who we had on the show before that was so mad about the fact that it was Superstorm Sandy. He refused to call it that. Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't call it that either. I mean, it's a
Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
How the heck? Think about this. How the heck does something hit from the east with a 946 millibar pressure? The Atlantic City pressure went to 940. Our house in Summers Point went to 946 millibars because we had our super duper barometer down there. But the pressure at JFK was 976. So there's a 30 millibar pressure difference. When do you see that in a non-warm core feature? The answer is you don't, and so whatever. But
Yeah,
here's the thing.
Wait, Joe, I just want to say, you know, like with this, right? I mean, there was a lot we learned from Sandy, which was we can't get caught up in so much of the minutia, you know, especially with the hurricane watches and warnings, right? I mean, if Sandy was to happen today, if the exact same thing was to happen today, there would more than likely be some kind of hurricane watch and warning. Now, I know it's a separate issue from what you're saying, but I'm just, you know, just want to put that out there.
They put out hurricane wind warnings or whatever the heck it was.
It's not the same.
It's right. It's like, okay, it's another nor'easter coming. Because, you know, it's funny. I'll tell you a story. Both for Irene and Sandy, I had O'Reilly and Hannity boarded up, or they got all their stuff 6-7 days in advance. Because what happens is when people have to, you know, the rush comes on. If I could get a client ahead of the game, and that's what I do with all my other clients. If I give you a 1-day advantage over the consensus, you're the one that's going to wind up being better off for it. And it's funny, at the time they're buddies now, but they weren't friends. So for the first time, Sean told me, "Yeah, I got all this lumber for Irene," and people are going, "What the heck are you getting all this lumber for?" He says, "The hurricane's coming, right?" The second time they noticed him doing it, and all his neighbors, you know, ran out and got that for Sandy. The funny thing about Irene was, like most of the East Coast storms, the strongest winds came on the backside of it with the west-northwest wind when the sun's out and the wind's gusting to 80. But it's just interesting that mystique of, oh, it's got a name, ooh, like that, or ooh, it's a hurricane. Yeah, it's almost like, remember the movie Caddyshack?
Yes.
The ball is on the edge of the cup, and he's sitting there looking at it. That's how much differential these guys look at it. Oh, is this or is this that, or how close it is? You can always justify what you want to justify in the weather because it's so infinite that you can actually do whatever you want to do. So you know, it's good to be king and good to be issuing the verifications because you get to win no matter what.
There was Joe. It was meteorologist Tom Levine. Palmer just remembered. I was racking my brain for it. We had Tom Levine on. He was a CBS meteorologist. He was the one who was adamant. Hey, this Sandy absolutely deserves the name of hurricane. And we actually went down. Emergency management officials from Atlantic County went down to the National Hurricane Conference in New Orleans, and we had a whole panel discussion on this. And there was vast agreement that, years from now, we may not be alive to see it, but they'll change the designation on it.
Yeah, well, it's funny how these guys work. I have a tremendous amount of respect for guys at Hurricane Center. I love Eric Blake. He doesn't really like me because we don't see eye to eye on what's causing the global warming, and that's fine. But he's a tremendous researcher, tremendous forecaster, and some of the explanations for things are like, you really? You're going to go with that? I think a lot of this, and you guys are so smart. It's the equivalent of theologians arguing over how many angels you could stick on the head of a needle. I mean, you get into these situations here, and it just doesn't make a whole heck of a lot. Like I've always said, look, if it's a closed rotary circulation, if it's over water 26 C or higher with gales in one quadrant, name it and be done with it, right? If it's originating over colder water, then you don't name it. We should have two separate hurricane seasons. One for these ham sandwiches that run around all over the place. And, that's what Tom Downs and I call them. Ham sandwich.
I like it.
Ham sandwich.
I like it.
I like that one. I
And
mean,
let's
yeah,
talk,
you get those little mini ones. Joe, we're gonna take a break. I mean, this is a lot, man. I mean, we should have done a whole episode. We should have done a whole hour with you. We're gonna take a break though. We're gonna come back on the other side here with Tidal Flooding Talk.
All right.
Whenever you're ready. Whenever you're ready, Paul. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We're having a great conversation here tonight, but the New Jersey Coastal Coalition would like to remind our viewers that floods happen all over. Think you're not at risk? Floods happen in every U.S. state, and not just in high-risk zones. Even a few inches of water can cost thousands of dollars in damage. Check your flood risk at FEMA.gov and stay informed.
All right, so we are back with Joe Bastardi, and we'll get into this in the last segment here, but Joe is born in Rhode Island, lived in Summers Point, been in Pennsylvania for a long time. Like Dan, I used to watch you when you were with AccuWeather. Back then, back in the 2000s, that's how I got a lot of my weather information. I really feel like what you were doing was really ahead of its time from where we are now with YouTube and the YouTubers out there with weather. You were doing that like 15, 20 years ago. And we'll get to that. But I do want to talk about your power and impact scale that you really helped develop at Weatherbell here. And, Dan and I talked about this, off the air. I mean, we do feel like, and I think you agree that, we have enough data sources and information available where we can kind of track this power and impact in real time and give a category to it. Just to initiate, if you're not familiar with this, the Saffir-Simpson scale, which is how we use hurricanes, is based on wind speeds alone. You're saying, hey, we're going to look at wind, but we're going to look at other factors as well to give a category scale, because not all category 1s are the same. Not all category 5s are the same. So, Joe, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Tell us, your inspiration for this and what actually goes into determining what category a storm would be given the power and impact scale.
Okay, well, first of all, the initial genesis of this was Friday night as Hurricane Ike was coming to the Texas coast. I was on O'Reilly, and they downgraded at 5 p.m. from a 3 to a 2. And Bill says, well, I guess it's not that bad. And I'm like, What? It's a, you know, it's a monster. In other words, instead of having 110-mile-an-hour winds, it's 109 or something, you know. And that drove me crazy because Ike was a monstrous storm. It was so monstrous that 2 days later, inland, when it was up over the Ohio Valley and the sun came out in this sector of the storm where the sun came out, the air got unstable, massive power outages from 70, 80-mile-an-hour winds because the circulation was so strong. So what happened was, and now you see the Hurricane Center says, yeah, size matters. All right. So I started getting more and more antsy about this. Why should a storm like Donna, a Category 4, which hit Southwest Florida back in 1960, had hurricane force winds extending all the way to Miami, right? Why should that be in the same category as Charlie was a Category 4 and Miami's peak wind gust was 21 miles an hour? I mean, what they do is they take a spot wind at the center, and that's how you rate it, and that doesn't make any sense at all to me. And it really started firing me up because everybody knows my I believe that the situation with climate change has turned into a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of dragging the weather into the sewer, and since I love the weather so much, I don't like seeing the weather in the sewer. So you see, oh, look at that, it's a Category 5 hurricane. Well, the gale force winds extend out 75 miles. How is
Yeah.
that like a Category 4 or 5 hurricane like Carla? Carla gave hurricane force winds to everybody on the Texas coast. That's a 400-mile coastline, right? So
Yep.
you have a Harvey that's a 4, and if Harvey had not been trapped by the cold trough, I mean, Harvey was known mainly for its rain, right? With Hurricane Harvey, it was a much smaller storm. So what happens is you get this. We keep the original Saffir-Simpson scale for pressure and wind. In other words, okay, we'll acknowledge that peak wind. But what we do is this: we get a formula to assign a value to the extent of the 64 knot winds, and we do that with the 50 knot winds, and we do that with the 34 knot winds. So you have three more metrics involved. You now have five metrics instead of just the spot wind speed at the center. And there's another metric that gets involved. If the storm is rapidly deepening, you add a category to it. Why? Because the turbulence that's involved. I've been in an argument with Hurricane Center for 30 years on this. If a storm is rapidly deepening, the wind's getting to the surface. It's not like it has to wait to come down. My goodness, a downburst from a thunderstorm gets to the surface in under a minute, for goodness sakes. So if you have enough upward motion and turbulence that's causing the rapid deepening of the storm, the wind's getting to the surface. Conversely, if it's weakening, it means the storm is in a more stable atmosphere, wind's not getting to the surface. Idalia, they still want to classify as a major hurricane, and there's nowhere on the Florida coast where the center went, the wind gusted over 90 miles an hour with Idalia, gusted over 90 miles an hour with Idalia. And that's what the pressure was rapidly rising. So on my scale, it was a 2.4. Sandy was a 3.2 on our scale. You know why?
Yeah.
The hurricane winds extended out. They were only 8 miles an hour, but they extended out so far that it jacked the scale. The 34 knot wind category got a 6.2. In other words, you add them all up, divide it by 5, and you come up with a scale. Right now, Imelda, well, we're showing this on the 28th. We're talking to here, Imelda's around. It's a 2.16. My major starts at a 2.5, but theoretically, a storm could actually reach 5.5. The other thing is, think about this. What the heck? Why can't you call it a 2.9? Okay, let's say the wind is 108 miles an hour with the hurricane. Why is that a category 2? It's closer to 3 than it is 2. So why aren't you doing that? I see.
Well, I think that's a simplicity thing, Joe. I would say people probably, like, you got to think general
Well,
public, right?
that's a problem. People aren't stupid. See, I don't believe people are stupid. I get in arguments all the time about weather hobbyists. Oh, they shouldn't be saying this. They shouldn't be saying that. Why not? Why, if they turn out to be pretty darn good, they add to the conversation. A lot of meteorologists I know are afraid of being beat by weather hobbyists. And then what good of you? Now, how does this circle back? Well, somehow or the other, there's this idea everybody has to being authority. Someone says, "Oh, Joe Bastardi is an authority." That's nonsense. No one is an authority except God on an infinite system. And I realize what we do is, instead of catering to the weather, the guts of the weather, we go, well, how am I going to look with this? How am I going to look with that? And I listen. I wasn't like this when I was at AccuWeather. Everything was about, you got to look good. You got to look good. You're never wrong. Even if you're wrong, you don't admit you're wrong. I mean, it was the entire thing, all for the glory of AccuWeather. Okay, I understand the brand name and all that, and that's great. That's great. But as I got older and I grew up a little bit more, especially in my faith, I realized that, who the heck are you in front of an infinite system? And I'll tell you, guys, I got so many weapons at Weatherbell. When I got to Weatherbell, they gave me everything to look at. I was, but and there are times when I was right at AccuWeather. I do believe, looking back at it, the good Lord had a hand in it, right? And I'll tell you why. Because for some reason or the other, He wanted me in another place at another time, so I had to hit some forecasts to get noticed about that stuff. So that circles back to the Saffir-Simpson scale and the powered impact scale. We are trying to make sure that the public knows that you get a category 4, like 1944, that had extent of hurricane force winds 400 miles in diameter. That's not the same as some squirrely little category 4 where the gales only extend out 100 miles from the center. And then you can't use it for propaganda purposes. I'm sorry if that gets people mad, but the amount of energy, Joe, the amount of energy in a monster storm as a category 3 is a lot greater than a pinprick 5. All right, and yet the pinprick 5 will get the notoriety about it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody, I mean, let's put it this way. I don't think there's any meteorologist that would disagree with that. I mean, Sandy was, and we just talked about this, right? But let's say Sandy was a Cat 1 at landfall, right? I mean, Sandy's a more impactful storm than some of these Cat 3s and Cat 4s. And you said just that because in your power and impact scale, you said what we have. I mean, Sandy was the largest storm by tropical storm force winds, so it definitely has something to do there. Joe, we got to take one more break. I'm sorry. I know you got, we want to, have you talk about hurricanes here, but we're going to take one more break. We're going to come back on the other side here with Tidal Flooding Talk.
Become a champion with us in Atlantic City.
Welcome back to this week's Tidal Flooding Talk, Everything Weather, with a pair of Joes, Palma and myself. And Joe, I want to ask you too. I mean, your scale, just because it factors in the size of the storm, the strength of these winds, I think much more accurately factors in storm surge, right? Which the Saffir-Simpson scale doesn't, because it's just based on the wind at the core. So storm surge, which especially in the Northeast, especially with Sandy, was so much more impactful than the wind, is more accounted for in your scale. That's the first point I wanted to make. And the second one is, I saw you tweet recently that a researcher at USF, wants something done akin to what you've been talking about for 2 decades. Is that the first step to kind of get this, get the ball rolling?
It's going to come out of government and academia. It's never going to come out of a private sector schmuck that can't even get in Wikipedia. For all the pioneering we've done at Weatherbell with the power, I mean, look at where we thought the highest ACE would be this year, right? We had that red zone. The 2023 24 forecast was put out December 7th, 2023, calling for a hurricane season from hell. And it was just like, it was divine influence that had that. I mean, it was unbelievable. I'll never put out forecasts that good. But now look at this year. We had it northeast Gulf of Mexico, out in the Atlantic to around Bermuda. We haven't had any landfalls. We've had impact storms. But the fact that there have been so many storms going in there, we got houses collapsing on the North Carolina coast because of this kind of stuff. So the whole impact idea and the preseason impact forecast. See, I don't really care how many storms there are. I really don't. I play the number games because everybody wants to play the number game. The real thing is how many are going to impact the United States or the Bahamas. I got clients in the Bahamas. right? And how strong are they going to be? What do we have to look for? Now, to make this season end perfectly, we need a couple of hurricanes to try to come up out of the Caribbean. The best you can do is have a chance. You guys can see as well as I that the end game could set up with one or two hurricanes coming out of the Caribbean in mid October, even into early November this
Oh
year.
yeah.
And then
Yep.
that of course, and this was put in my head by my dad, would always say there's got to be a linkage between what hurricanes are doing in the winter. The reason he thought that was because hurricanes were nature's way of taking heat out of the tropics, redistributed into the temperate region. So they are trying to show you some kind of pattern that's going on. And then you have to determine, does that continue into the winter, and the natural changes that would occur if the same pattern that produces hurricanes shows up in the winter. So
Yeah.
it's all pretty it's all a lot. It's a lot of fun for me. We're living in the golden age of weather because we have so much stuff we could look at, and I'm just blessed that hopefully my end game isn't over the next couple of years. I hope the good Lord gives me plenty of time to hang around over here.
I have a feeling with the motor inside of you, there's a lot more Joe Bastardi to come, for sure. So look,
might not be a good thing.
yeah, we got 90 seconds here. We're gonna have to cut, but I do want to ask, being in Summers Point, what did Summers Point mean to you? What does it mean to you now?
I couldn't wait to get out of Summers Point. I was
Okay.
about as popular as COVID.
We love Summers Point, New Jersey Coastal Coalition community. I just want to say that.
No, but I was at Penn State for 3 weeks, and all I could think of was getting back.
Yeah.
And it can be that way. I miss my best times were I love to hang out with my mom and dad. And I had my weight room. Because I had to lift because everybody was stronger than me, and I had a father. Oh my gosh, you know what? I got to tell you something. If I was twice the man, if I was twice the man I am now, I'm not half the man my dad was. He was just so good to me as far as weather. He'd always talk to me about the weather. He always tell me these stories. Unbelievable. And then what was funny when Garrett got older, he would tell Garrett stories that he never told me, which was kind of funny. But Summers Point, I grew up. I'm so glad I grew up down there. It's kind of funny because Summers Point is like between Linwood and Northfield and Summers Point. We're sort of, we're the Backstreet Boys down there. We're like the greasers and all that stuff. So I like going back to my high school reunion because things things changed a little bit, but it's a great place. A lot of traffic now.
Go 1, 2, 3, check.
Yeah, that's for sure. Summers Points have happened in spots, Joe. I mean, it's probably in my top 5 favorite towns at the Jersey Shore. I would say that for sure.
Well, you know what? I found out that I was one of the top 10 people in Summers Point. Someone mailed me, hey, you're one of the top 10 people that grew up in Summers Point, New Jersey. I was like, what?
Did not know that. And we should say too, and last point, Summers Point, a little bit of a weather mecca here with you and Matt Lanza. For Summers Point, who else? I feel like I'm missing someone else. Dan.
Well, Jim lived there for a while. Jim Everwine.
Oh yeah, Jim Everwine lived there. Yeah.
Now, but Jim was so good to me. When I'd go into the office at Atlantic City, a lot of those guys didn't really like me, because I was whatever. But Jim just took me under his wing. I absolutely love that guy.
Yeah, Jim's great. We all love Jim, and one that there, Joe. But thanks so much for coming on, talking about power and impact scale and everything. This was a hell of an episode, and we're here for it. So thank you, Joe. We'll have to have you maybe come back on. We talk about winter stuff at some point, but thanks for the time, and we'll chat with you soon.
Well, God bless you and enjoy the weather. It's the only weather you got.
I like that. All right. Well, for the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and Tri-X 57, I am Joe Martucci. For Dan Skeldon and Palma Shiles, we will chat with you next Tuesday on Tidal Flooding Talk.